Once again, welcome back, everyone. Allow me to begin with the Dhyana Shlokas. Om ஐந்து கரத்தனை ஆனை முகத்தனை இந்தின் நிளம்பிறை போன்ற ஏற்றினை நந்தி மகந்தனை ஞான குழுந்தினை புந்தியில் வைத்தடி போற்றுகின்றேனே. யஸ்த்யக்த்வா ரூபமாத்யம் பிரபவதி ஜகதோ நேகதானுக்ரஹாய பிரக்ஷீண க்லேஷராசிர் விஷம விஷதரோ அநேகவக்த்ர சுபோகி सर्वज्ञान प्रसूतिर भुजग परिकरो प्रीतये यस्य नित्यं देवो हि शस्सवो व्यात् सित विमलतनुर् योगदो योगयुक्तः योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहु पुरुषाकारं शंखचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं। श्रीमते अनंताय नागराजाय नमो नमः। अस्मदाचार्येभ्यः सर्वेभ्यो नमो नमः। ओम। And gently let's open our eyes. So welcome back, everyone. Here is the plan for today. We are going to begin for the next hour or maybe next 2 hours. We will study the topic of Ishvara given in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Why does Patanjali bring in this new entity called Ishvara? We will see that. And of what utility is it to the sadhaka? We're going to examine that also. And the last hour, we will also continue with where we left off yesterday. We looked at one sutra for the asana. Remember, the topic is still incomplete. So we are going to complete the second and the third sutra around asanas also. That will be towards the end of today's session. At 5 p.m., we're going to have a very special guest. So one of my teachers, Dr. Venkata Raju, he's a great scholar in Sanskrit and a great scholar in Bhagavad Gita. I studied most of my Bhagavad Gita wisdom is from him. I studied with him since 2008 and I continue to study with him. So he's going to be here. He lives in Dallas. So he's going to be here. Okay. So let us look at the topic of Ishvara. Now, as we saw before, Yoga Shastra is based upon Sankhya, right? And we saw what is Sankhya. Samyak Khyayate Prakashyate Vastu Tattvam Anaya iti Sankhya. So Sankhya is nothing but correct understanding. When you understand things correctly, without distortion or without obfuscation, without eclipsing anything, without covering any part of the truth. When we see the full truth without distortion, it will take you to Samadhi, right? That is the basic tenet of Sankhya philosophy. For example, if you truly know who you are, you will not be unhappy at all. It's like they give a beautiful analogy. A beggar has been begging all their life. Say 50 years, they have been begging. And then somebody tells them, oh, I recognize you. You're actually the prince. You are the long lost prince. You are inheriting this, billions of dollars. And can you imagine what relief it will bring to the mind of such a person? If the beggar really knew who he was, then all the struggles, all the troubles in the mind, all that will simply disappear. Just by knowing that I have the capacity to change my destiny. I have the freedom. I can direct my life however I want. I'm not a slave to the external conditions, external surroundings. I can craft my life the way I want. Even though in that moment, the beggar might be starving, They might be exhausted. They might not have eaten for so many days. But the mere thought that I am inheriting this big, treasure, this big kingdom, that mere thought will simply make sure it disappears all of the struggles. There is no longer any misery. That is the state of mind Sankhya brings. Right now, we have a limited identity about ourselves. A teacher used to say, you are who you are, not who you think you are. You see, our thought limits us. The thought that he is a beggar makes him beg throughout their life. But who he really is a prince. So all of us have this big treasure within us. We don't recognize it. We think we are a small version of the bigness of who we are. And then we go about our life struggling. The moment self-realization happens, then, oh wow, this is who I am. I'm happy now. Because wow, such grand being. And when that self-recognition, cognize things together, recognize oneself, self-realization, that brings samadhi. That's why Sankhya says that if you know who you are, then it brings samadhi. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yatta jnanam matam mama. That means, so this appears in the 13th chapter, I think second or third verse. He says, just knowing who you are is one part of the equation. It is not the complete thing. You should also know where you are, right? The context, where you are. Because once we know, okay, I am Brahman, Vedanta says, I am Brahman. Okay, know what? We still have to wash dishes. We still have to cook. We still have to go to work. Things like that. You see? So where am I? What is the nature of the Prakriti? What is it for? Just because I know who I am, can I stop functioning in this world? It's not possible, right? In fact, we will function from a higher level. When the beggar knows that he is a prince, he will act in a totally different way, right? So they will take a more expansive role. In fact, the highest expansive role you can take is that of Ishwar. And we'll come to that in a moment. So we are all having this limited identity and we are functioning as a limited being. Not because we are truly limited. It is because our thought that limits it. For example, a great tennis player, if they don't know that they have so much talent, they will play only matches that are small level. They will not allow themselves to play in a higher league, you see. So they will not play a bigger game. So the recognition of who I am allows us to function more effectively in where we are. So both the questions, who am I and where I am, go hand in hand. It's very important. Sankhya, it answers both. Who am I? The recognition of the Purusha. And it also gives some insights about where I am. The nature of this world, nature of this universe. And it talks about the universe being made up of 24 tattvas. And I quoted that verse the other day. 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I think 6th or 7th verse. Mahabhutani ahankaraha buddhihi avyaktamevacha indriyani dasha ekamcha panchachendriya gocharaha. 24 tattvas, which includes the 5 elements and the 5 subtle elements called tanmatras, the mind, the 10 sense organs, which is 5 organs of action, 5 organs of perception. And then we have the ego, the cosmic ego, ahankara. And then Mahabhutani, ahankara, buddhi, intellect, and avyakta. Avyakta is the unmanifest, which is the subtlest form of Prakriti, which is still different from Purusha. Many people get stuck in distinguishing between subtlest Prakriti and the Purusha. And Sankhya goes in detail how to see them as separate. In fact, enumerating these 24 tattvas, plus 1 Purusha, totally 25 building blocks that form the whole universe. It's like the same bricks, 25 bricks, you can construct the whole building or whole universe can be deconstruct into these 25 tattvas. And this is also another reason why it is called Sankhya, because the word Sankhya means counting, enumeration. Sankhya means counts or enumerating things. Sankhya means Sankhyayaha. Iti Sankhya. Sankhyayaha means that which is born out of enumeration. Enumerating 25 tattvas. The knowledge that is born out of enumeration is Sankhya. And this is a common thing in Sanskrit. You extend the first syllable. For example, Rama's one of Rama's names was Dasharathi. Dasharathasya putraha. So Dasharatha's son is Dasharathi. Janaka's daughter is Janaki.
Samasa.
It's
Is it a samasa?
I don't know whether it's a samasa. Samasa, two words you bring together. Oh, maybe it is.
Samasa.
I'll check that.
Expanding the meaning of one word. Sandhi is bringing two words together.
Yeah. I think it's called Vigraha Vakyam, if I remember correctly. So I'll look it up.
Because Bharat, we say Briyate iti Bharata. Like that which. So that's what I remember.
But this is the Sashti Vibhakti. That means the possessing. Dasharatha's son. Janaka's daughter. And Dhritarashtra's sons are called Dhartarashtraha. And this word is, you will find in many shlokas in Bhagavad Gita. Dhartarashtraha. It refers to the Kauravas. So, Sankhyayaha iti Sankhya. Sankhya means that which is born out of counting, enumeration. So, it's a second definition of Sankhya. First one we already saw before. Samyak khyayate, prakashyate, etc. So, that which is born out of counting. So, if you look at the 24 tattvas of the Prakriti and the one Purusha, there is no mention of God. Right? It doesn't mean that Sankhyans were atheists. In their teaching, there was no need for a God. Whether God was there or not, Sankhya was indifferent to it. It's very interesting, right? We don't need a God. We'll manage by ourselves.
Because the topic was only nature of existence.
Nature of who I am and nature of where we are.
Yeah.
And who created it? Sankhya gives a theory of creation also. It gives a theory of creation. The theory basically goes, Purushas were always there. And the Prakriti, the Moola Prakriti, which is called Avyakta, was always there. They were all infinite in time and they are separate. They are not the same, they're separate. And then the Moola Prakriti, which is the Avyakta, it goes through a process of evolution. A part of the Moola Prakriti now becomes Ahankara, and then the intelligence, Buddhi, and then it evolves into the Sattvic aspect, evolves into the sensors, our eyes, ears, etc. Tamasic aspect becomes all these inanimate entities, and it's the Rajas that pulls them apart. So there's an elaborate theory it gives, how the evolution took place, and it explains what we see. It's a very coherent, very cohesive theory. It's amazing. It's a very fascinating theory. In fact, the whole of Ayurveda, it is borrowed from Sankhya. Now, Sankhya doesn't talk about any God. So, Patanjali, in the Yoga Sutras, as we saw, Yoga and Sankhya are very, very close. Yoga builds upon Sankhya. What distinguishes Yoga from Sankhya is, if somebody tells the beggar, oh, you are a prince, and if they say, I don't see that, you are just deceiving me. What little I have, you want to take it away. So I don't want to believe you. How can you convince me that it's my true identity? See, if we hear the Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, right? So there is a big grandeur about the self, but I don't see it. I still have to go work. I go through ups and downs, misery and happiness. We go through these cycles of life. So how do we experientially understand it? Not just conceptually in the head. How to experientially understand it? That is where yoga comes. So yoga is a practical, systematic approach where we convert the conceptual understanding into experiential understanding. You will know without a doubt that you are the ultimate. In fact, there's a beautiful story in the Taittiriya Upanishad, third chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad. So Bhrigu, great sage, he tells his son Varuna, find out who you are. And the first thing he says is, I am the body, Annamaya Kosha. I am the body. He was very confident about his answer. Because wherever he sees, people are trying to bring comfort to the body. They earn money, they build house, whatever, to bring comfort and happiness to the body. So I am the body, he says. Am I right? He asks. Am I right? And then the father says, okay, contemplate a little bit more. And then he says, okay, I thought about some more time. I did some tapas. A deeper understanding has come. You are right. I am not the body. I am the prana. Because when the prana and the breathing stops, the person is declared dead. So it must be the breathing that contains life. I am the prana, pranamaya kosha. Am I correct? And then the father says, contemplate some more. And then he comes back with another answer. Confidently, he says, I am the manomaya kosha. I am the mind. Because people want to feel happy. They don't want unhappiness. So they are constantly dealing with their emotions. So that is what drives the activities in life. So I must be the mind. And he says, think some more. Then he comes back and says, it's the intellect. Vijnanamaya kosha. Am I right? He asks. And the father says, think a little bit more. And then Anandamaya kosha. And then he says, think for some more. And then he finds out I am the Purusha or the Brahman. I am Brahmasmi. He discovers that. And once he discovers that, he doesn't go to his father because he's so sure of the answer that he didn't want any validation. It was experientially so obvious that he didn't require a validation for it. You see? So that is the experiential understanding yoga gives. You see? That you are happiness. Okay, yesterday we saw in Vairagya, we put this 2 steps of Vairagya, right? Now, even after listening to that, we still go and buy an iPhone 15, thinking it's going to give joy. So we are not really imbibed these understandings. So how to convert that into experiential reality is what yoga does. Systematic way in which it brings us there.
So can we say Samkhya is probably the theory of yoga and yoga is the practicals of Samkhya?
Yes, many authors, many great saints interpret it that way. So theory and practice. They say, right, for all theoretical purposes, theory and practice are the same. But for all practical purposes, they are different. So Samkhya and yoga. In fact, Arjuna asked this question. You have told me who I am happiness, etc. Then why do you want me to fight? Once I know who I am, I'll just be sitting happily in a cave and I will revel in the joy of the self. So why do you make me fight this war? And then he says, no, a person who has discovered who they are, they will not refrain from action. In fact, they will act in the world in a totally different way. They will play a bigger game, as I said about the tennis match. They will play in a bigger league and they will have a bigger influence in the universe. Okay. So why does, yeah.
So you spoke, you're speaking about like in Samkhya, they tell you the whole, how the evolution happened. I think it's a larger question of, so there was always Purusha, Prakriti, but we are now trying, the whole attempt of human life is to go back to the Purusha, right, to abide in the self. So the question is, if it was always there, why did it reach here? And is that an evolution in really, or like how? It's kind of a bit of an oxymoron.
Yes, in fact, that's a very intricate question, and I'll share a couple of answers that people give around that. So the first thing is, when we awaken to the reality of who we are, we discover that we jumped into this state of ignorance deliberately. It's not just that somebody pushed us into this well and you are trapped here. We deliberately, it's like you go to a movie, you deliberately suspend belief so that you can enjoy the movie better. You see, if you know the punchline in that movie, we will not enjoy it as much, right? Or if you're watching a game like India-Pakistan cricket match, say, if you know who's the winner, then it won't be as thrilling, right? Only when there is uncertainty, only when there is some ignorance. So here ignorance plays a very vital role, right? We think that we need to remedy the ignorance by bringing knowledge. And that is a right conclusion because it brings us back to the true source of happiness. But ignorance also plays a very vital role. It makes us feel alive. If you know everything, you know all the storylines of all movies, and you know who is going to win the match. If somebody knows all three, past, present, and future, then it will be a very dull life. You're just walking from one place to another, one event to another. There is no surprise there anymore.
I think, Anna, we realize the value of light only when we are in darkness.
Exactly.
We realize the value of joy when you experience relief from that pain. So I think for us to, if it's already there,
We take it for granted.
yeah, like a child, when it's there with the parents, just take them for granted. But when we are away
Yes.
and when we go through those struggles, we realize the value.
Yes. In fact, great yoga teachers such as B.K. Iyengar, they jumped into yoga because they had some ailment. And they looked at yoga as a way to cure them. And they found a big treasure. Search for a trinket, find a treasure. That's what yoga is about. You'll look for a little thing. I want to touch my toes. That was my goal when I started my yoga class. I wanted to touch my toes. And then they discovered it's a whole new world. That's the analogy they gave in the Yoga Vasishtam. There was a beggar who is searching for, they lost one quarter, 25 cents, frantically searching for it. And while they were searching for it, they find a pot of gold. Search for a trinket, find a treasure. That is most people's experience in yoga. See, so it allows us to see the deeper dimensions that surprise us. So yoga is the practical side that helps us put in touch with who we are. And when we are in touch with who we are, we can still enjoy the movie. For the time when we are in the movie theater, we suspend our knowledge and go with the flow of the movie. Though internally we know, deep inside we know that the movie is different, I am different. The war in the movie is not damaging my body. I'm still safe. But when you're watching the movie, you get engrossed in it. So that is why we jumped into this world. When we awaken, we will realize that we came to this world deliberately. It's not that we were pushed into it or forced into it. Okay, so Patanjali, in the Yoga Sutras, there are two major things that he gives as an add-on to Sankhya. The first thing is a systematic set of practices that allows us to see who the Purusha is and not get caught up in the Prakriti. And we look at the systematic practices, the Ashtanga Yoga, Raja Yoga, or the Samadhi Yoga, and the Kriya Yoga. And under each of those yogas, there are specific sadhanas. There's a sadhana called Pratiprasava sadhana, and there's a Pratipaksha sadhana, and then there is the Pratyak Chetanadigamam, another sadhana. In fact, we're going to see that today. Pratyak Chetanadigamam. We will see that practice today. So there are many practices which are all upayas, remedial measures. So the second thing that Patanjali gives as something new in Sankhya is he introduces all of us to this entity called Ishvara. Ishvara. Who is this entity? Some new thing that has been added on to the 25 tattvas, right? You have Purusha plus 24 Prakriti tattvas. And now Patanjali says, okay, here's one more. The reason why he introduces Ishvara is because it's going to help in our sadhana. It is not that with zero utility, we just introduce someone. That entity, Ishvara, is going to help us in our sadhana. We can utilize the being, Ishvara, in our sadhana to discover who we are. That is why Patanjali introduces Ishvara. And then Patanjali also says, this Ishvara entity is not a 26th entity. Ishvara is one more Purusha. Sankhya says there is one Prakriti and there is multiplicity of Purushas, right? The Purusha in the heart of every being is distinct, unique. Ishvara is just one more Purusha, one more fellow, like all of us, one more fellow. It's like in a country, perhaps the most powerful person is, say, the Prime Minister of India. Perhaps he has a lot more power than the average Purushas in the country. He is still a human being, right? Like that, Ishvara is still a Purusha. So Patanjali says, Ishvara is still a Purusha, like all of us.
Is he referring to the Jivatma concept here?
He doesn't use the words Jivatma and Paramatma.
Okay.
So they all have technical definition. What's a Jiva and how is a Jiva different from the Paramatma? All those come later in the Vedanta.
Okay.
So rather than trying to see how those words refer in the Yoga Sutras, let's use just the word. In fact, Yoga Sutras don't even talk about the word Brahman or other devatas such as Vishnu, Shiva, and all that. He doesn't.
So he is one more fellow.
Yeah.
But this fellow, is he common to everybody?
Common as
Is this one fellow who's sitting inside you?
Hmm.
Is he also sitting inside every person, every being alone?
that,
Is there a mention of that?
No. If you look at Sankhya, I mean, there is a mention of that, but Sankhya says there's a multiplicity of Purushas. It is not one Purusha that is appearing as different.
Okay.
There's actually multiplicity of Purusha, according to
Okay.
Sankhya.
According to Sankhya.
According to Sankhya.
Okay.
Vedanta later will say, no, there's only one Purusha.
Uh,
And Yoga borrows that foundation. According to Yoga, yes, there is a multiplicity of Purusha. Yeah.
Okay.
And
how are they different? Multiplicity of Purushas?
they're different in the sense they are separate, but they are identical.
They're identical.
So
they are similar but not the same. I mean,
the analogy that we saw yesterday was, do you remember the analogy? Maybe you had stepped out.
No.
The analogy is, if you have a bunch of $10 notes, they're all different $10 notes.
but the value is the same.
But one $10 note, another $10 note, there is no difference. If somebody gives a change, do you want this $10 or this $10? Then you don't care, you just grab one and
So even though it's multiplicity, it does not necessarily mean anything. That all of are equally potent or equally
exactly.
this.
Deep inside, the Purusha Tattva that's residing in the heart of all beings is all identical. It is not that one is superior to the other. So ultimately, Ishvara is not somebody who's superior to the other. Right? It's all the same. And we're going to see that sutra as well in a few moments. So what makes Ishvara different? And especially we have heard about Ishvara Pranidhana, right? Devotion to Ishvara. So why can't I be devoted to some other Purusha? Why this specific Ishvara Purusha? Right? And we are going to see all that. That's the reason why. So would you like to know
Yes.
how this Ishvara fellow is different and why he's put up on a pedestal? Yeah.
So in that way, today that we have multiplicity in gods is also a very yogic concept, right? Because it's though yoga does not specifically talk about God, but talks about so many Purushas, so that they all are same but different, like in the sense, like your friend,
They're unique.
Yeah.
that they're unique, but in terms of a value, like even in gods, we don't say this is high God or like God. we treat them the same. So, though yoga does not specify, and it's a tantric concept to have those many, but it still aligns, right? That, oh,
You can still
Ganesha,
have.
Shiva, like
You can still
Saraswati,
have.
they're unique, but they're still all. Is that the right thing to say?
Yes. In other words, deep inside they're all the same.
Yeah.
Patanjali does use the word Ishta Devatas. But Ishta Devata is still not the Purusha.
Purusha, exactly.
So you can have a hierarchy. Maybe somebody who's like Prime Minister, if you think of Prime Minister as the Ishvara. All people in
They're like
anywhere,
they're
all people are
angels.
human beings.
Actually, that's a very good analogy because the way I understood from the Ishvara is the one who transcended all the gunas, the Purusha, Yadya, something. Then the Shiva, Vishnu, they're almost like a prime minister, whereas the Purusha is like a president.
Yeah.
He cannot really do anything, but it's just
So under Ishvara, you could have a person who's managing one state. Say there'll be like a Ishta, one Devata who's controlling that state. So the point is, each of the Purushas have a different responsibilities. One fellow is having the responsibility of the whole country. One person's responsibility is in one state. One person's responsibility in one home. Somebody may not even have the power in that home. They might be responsible for only one teddy bear. You see? So like that, there is a big spectrum. But the Purusha that resides in all of them are identical. They are no way different, right? They're separate, but they are identical. Another analogy. One person drives a bicycle. Another person drives a car. Another one rides a sports car. Another one rides an airplane. Another one rides a rocket. All are human beings, right? But the prakriti that they're influencing, they're controlling is different. They're all human beings. Like that Ishvara and all the Purusha, they're all the same.
The name and form of the deity that's separate from Ishvara. Ishvara is above that.
Yes, we're going to see why Ishvara is above.
So the Purusha within.
We cannot even say above.
Okay, but
We
it's
can-
like the superset. Of
Yes,
that. Okay.
yes.
And then the Purusha within the deity is the same. Same applies. It's separate but identical.
Correct. Yes. And the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali also talks about there are many Purushas who choose to remain disembodied. So we see Purushas here like human beings and even plants and animals, etc. But there are many Purushas who don't take up a physical body. They are there somewhere, maybe in the Antariksha or whatever. They are in the subtler realms. Bhava pratyayo videha prakriti layanam is a sutra. Videha. They don't care for a body. They live their life. They don't need a vehicle. They walk. They don't need a car or a bicycle, whatever. They simply walk. You see? So these are all the Purushas.
Purusha always be within.
Oh.
Without body.
Can you repeat that, Sriniji?
The Purusha,
Hmm.
I thought always bodiless. Today.
If you think about it, when we use the sharp intellect, which is called Viveka Khyati, when we discover that myself is not the body, we discover ultimately the body is something separate from the self. In that sense, you can say everyone is a Vidya. But right now, we are using this body as a vehicle. Body as a vehicle. Body allows us to receive the world, remember, through the Chitta Vrittis. And it allows us to influence the world with our karmendriyas.
So you're kind of saying that our individual Purusha made some sort of choice in expressing through the Prakriti.
That's a great question. Have we been given this body by somebody else, or did we deliberately choose? I want to be born as a beggar if somebody decides. Or I want to be born as an emperor. If given the choice, they will naturally choose to be an emperor. Say. Why do they want to deliberately suffer? Right? Now, it is said that because of the law of karma, in fact, Patanjali talks about the law of karma. There are 3 or 4 sutras in the second chapter. He talks about the law of karma. your law of karma, whether you have done punya karmas and papa karmas, your consequences will be directed by that. Somebody who has done a lot of destructive acts, the body that they will get in the next birth may not be of their choice, but in some sense they did choose it, but indeliberately. For example, if somebody eats junk food and then they get tummy ache the next day, they did choose the tummy ache, but it was indeliberate. Nobody said, "Oh, I want to experience tummy ache today." Right? It just happened as a consequence because of ignorance. Right? Ignorance. Ignorance is avidya. In fact, Patanjali says avidya or ignorance is the root cause of all the suffering. It's the root cause of klesha. We're going to come to that in a moment. Root cause of klesha or pain or misery is avidya. Because of avidya, we experience consequences that we did not deliberately choose.
Anna, I heard something, I don't know who told me this, but in Tiruvannamalai I heard this. At the time when the soul leaves the body, that's why we chant Ramanamam or Om Namo Narayana. That's because at the time the soul leaves the body, during that time when you remember the ultimate is Bhagwan, there's a chance that you might directly go off that. But there are a lot of chances where you get attached. You don't want to leave the body. And you're so scared because it's a new experience. So at that time, when the body leaves, it's in fear. So the next thing is it wants to go and attach and enter into a body. So at that time, when it's so jittery, whatever is available, the karmas will lead it towards the body of a dog or a worm. But if the soul is slightly aware, it would go and it would choose, okay, I want to be born to this because this will help me. There's still some leftovers to be fulfilled. So this is something I heard.
It appears in one of the Upanishads.
Yeah,
It's either
I don't know.
Atreya Upanishads or Mundaka Upanishad, one of the two, I don't remember which. It says that few moments before the death, they are given a glimpse of what is the next body that they will receive. The flash of a second, they will know which
Yeah.
body.
They can either choose the body or they can, if they think of Ishvara, said, I don't need this, they'll directly, I think that is given in Vashishta Dvaita, right?
But I think I understood the karma aspect of it. I guess I was calling back to your answer to Bhavnaji's question when he said that a person who's self-realized ultimately will understand that they deliberately came into this
Yes.
samsara. Right?
And that's a corollary to that.
Okay.
When self-realization happens, then the body they can choose in their next birth. If they want to appear in this world, they may not even want to.
Yeah.
If they want to, they can choose of their choice. Swechaya, it is called in Sanskrit. Swa Ichaya. It is not something that happens to them because of their consequences, but they choose. Those are called avatara purushas. Like when we talk about Krishna, Rama, and all that, they deliberately chose the body. And there's a reason why they are here. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. Whenever there is dharma is less, Krishna says, I will come there. They choose the body and come there because they have a work cut out for them. Krishna doesn't say, wherever dharma is very high, I will go there and nicely enjoy. They go to fix things. That deliberately they have an action. They have a work to do there.
So there is some choice, and then maybe it just gets clouded along the way.
Yes. A yogi, it is said, a yogi, suppose an unkind word, a tiny unkind word to somebody, we say, if the yogi recognizes that, it will have a tiny unpleasant consequence some 80 lifetimes later. They will not do it.
Oh,
They are so sensitive to it. You
okay.
see, even if the misery is a very tiny misery, which comes much, much later, after several yugas, with my 87th life from now, I will have a headache. So let me not do it. You see? But we know, if I have coffee, I'll have a headache, but they'll still drink coffee. I know I'll have a tummy ache when I eat junk food. They still eat junk food. So that's the opposite of a yogi. Okay. So let us now introduce ourselves to Ishvara. So Ishvara Pranidhanadva, the first time he introduces Ishvara, it's very interesting. He doesn't say who Ishvara is, not yet. He's going to say that in the next sutra. But the first sutra where he introduces Ishvara, he says, use Ishvara as a sadhana. Pranidhana means Bhakti Vishesha, special form of Bhakti, highest form of Bhakti, where you don't ask this or that. And we will see later what is Pranidhana, how to apply Pranidhana, how to practice Ishvara Pranidhana. So Patanjali is saying, Ishvara Pranidhanat Va. Va means or. So when you look at that segment of the Yoga Sutras, that sequence in the first chapter, he's giving some options to you. So there's a menu. You can either choose this or this practice or this practice. He's giving you a choice, which is very different from what we saw yesterday in Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, the operative word is and. You have to practice yama and niyama and asana and pranayama. He doesn't say choose one of the 8 and practice that alone. Then everyone will choose asanas because they want to put in Instagram. In Ashtanga Yoga, it's all and. But in the first chapter, the operative word is or. Because these teachings are meant for ekagra chitta. Remember, a person who is already in a focused state of mind. So he gives options. In all of these sutras, you will see the word va. Ishvara Pranidhanat va. And then Vishoka va Jyotishmati. Vitaraga Vishayam va Chittam. Swapna Nidra Jnana Lambanam va. Or you can do this or this or this, big one. So one of the options that he gives is a practice that utilizes the presence of Ishvara. You can use it for your sadhana. You can use Ishvara for your sadhana. That is why I'm introducing Ishvara. That is the implication here. Otherwise, if Ishvara was not useful to us through some practice, Patanjali will not even introduce that entity here. Maybe the entity is there, but why do we want to know about them if they're not going to benefit us? But there is a benefit that they give. We can use some sadhana around Ishvara, and that is why Patanjali introduces Ishvara. And of course, the student's mind will ask, okay, please introduce me to Ishvara and how to practice this pranidhana. These 2 questions come in the mind, right? So who is this fellow, Ishvara? Who is this fellow? Now, there are many attached meanings that we may have from before. We have to erase all that. Some people say Ishvara means Shiva. If you go to Vedanta, Ishvara is the Samashti Jiva. In other words, all the beings, see, each being has one body, but the universal being that has the whole physical universe as its body is Ishvara from the Vedantic perspective. But in yogic perspective, it's not that. It's not that. From the yogic perspective, the definition of Ishvara is, I'll quote the sutra. He says, Klesha karma vipaka ashayaihi aparamrishta purusha vishesha Ishvaraha. You'll see the first 4 words here. Klesha, karma, vipaka and ashaya. Aparamrishta means somebody who has transcended all this. Somebody who transcends these 4, and we will see what these 4 are. Somebody who is beyond these 4 and who is a Purusha Vishesha. Purusha Vishesha means a particular Purusha. Particular, one Purusha. Such a Purusha is Ishvara. My teacher used to give a lot of analogies for that. You know, when soldiers, when there's say 15 soldiers who are camping in a forest because they're going to they're defending their country and they're stationed in a forest. In the night, when they're sleeping, there will always be one person who's awake because the enemy might attack them or some animal will attack them. The rest of the 14 soldiers will be nicely sleeping. They will be in avidya. They're sleeping. But one entity will keep watch so that there is no danger. And the next day, somebody else will take turn. So in this yuga, one Ishvara has taken up that role. Next Yuga, maybe you will be the Ishvara. Who knows? You see, you will take turns. So Ishvara is that entity who is not asleep. That means who is not under the influence of avidya. The word klesha, misery, there are 5 kleshas that Patanjali describes later, but we'll not go into it. The root klesha, the single seed klesha that becomes the other 4 kleshas is avidya. Avidya means ignorance. Avidya kshetra muktaresham. That means that is the seed from which all the other kleshas they sprout. So Ishvara is beyond ignorance. That's the point here. Ishvara is always awake. Ishvara knows who they are. They have not stepped into this realm of ignorance. They are watchfully observing the whole universe. So that is, they are beyond klesha. Any question at this point?
No, I was going to say that this aligns so well with yesterday's, the 2 points of how to get Paramavairagya. The first one being that always think of, or what we did in the morning too, right? Always think of that one person who has transcended.
Yes, we saw the sutra yesterday, right? And today morning also we saw in the meditation. Vitaraga Vishayam Vachittam. By the way, you stole the punchline. Because that is exactly what Ishvara Pranidhana is.
Yeah.
So wherever you pour your awareness, you become like them. So pour your awareness on Ishvara is what Patanjali says. Ishvara Pranidhana is nothing but using Ishvara as a role model, because Ishvara is no different from me. We are all identical, separate but identical. So if I want to know my true nature, all I have to do is to pour my awareness into the biggest vessel possible, which is Ishvara.
But then why
it will
is
leave
this given as a separate sutra? Vitaraga Vishayam. It is also given as an option.
option.
Ilaya?
Yes, because the Vitaraga Vishayam can also be applied to non-Ishvaras. Yeah.
So Sriramji, sorry, I missed yesterday's thing. There's also another sutra in the beginning when you talk about Vairagya, Tattvaram Purushakyate Gunavaitosha.
Yes.
So is that also the same definition of Ishvara?
Ishvara is in that state. That self-realization will bring about Parama Vairagya. That's what the sutra is about. So there are 2 sutras on Vairagya. The first one says where the happiness is not. The second one says where the happiness is.
Yes.
That is the Tatparam Purushakyati.
Is that Parampurusha?
It is a Parama Vairagya.
Parama Vairagya.
That
but
Param?
Ishvara-
Okay.
Tatparam, because Tatparam, Vairagyasya Param.
So the
Parama
Ishvara
Vairagya.
has that qualities
Yes.
of transcended all the
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever highest ideal you can think of, it is always embodied by Ishvara. Another way to think about it, all the energy that we have in this world, for example, the energy that lights up this bulb, the electricity that makes all these gadgets work, car we drive, or even the fuel that we use for the petrol, whatever, any energy that we use comes from sunlight. Ultimately, sun is the source of that energy. So if you want to trace back what is the source or what is the highest version of this, you will trace it back to the sun. So if you want to ask who is the kindest person, and you can say, oh, this person, etc. But to see the role model who is the superlative, the kindest person, it will be Ishvara. You see? So Ishvara is the Siddha who has all the Siddhis. And that is why, Siddhas have a very big sphere of influence. They can even control what's happening in a different planet, like that Patanjali talks about in the 3rd chapter. Great Siddhis of yoga. Ishvara is one who has expanded sphere of influence, that his sphere of influence is the whole universe.
There's a different Ishvara in each iteration of the universe. Is that?
There is some theory behind that, but in the Yoga Sutras it doesn't mention explicitly. But you can say that, like the same 15 soldiers, each night one person will take the turn. Maybe we were all Ishwaras in one time before.
So if you go to use the Vedanta, does Ishvara correlate with the Saguna Brahman?
Yes. Saguna Brahman is Ishvara. In Vedanta, how Ishvara is defined as Brahman with Maya becomes Ishvara.
Okay.
Brahman plus Maya. So that Maya, you can say it's a Saguna. It's what brings the attributes, the gunas. Okay. So I hope this is interesting, right? This Ishvara is like a hero now in our plot.
Yeah, the interesting is Saguna Brahman, yet Tatpara Pushakyale Guna Vaidusha. The one who plays but who is not stopping.
Exactly. So in Vedanta, Ishvara is actually in the realm of the gunas. Because gunas is part of the Maya. But in Yoga Shastra, Ishvara has transcended that.
So it's from the which point of view are you looking at? Are you looking from the relation of the Maya? Then you are in the Guna, but if you look from there, it's only an appearance.
Yes. I mean, there are so many intricate things that this dialogue can lead us towards. For example, what is my sphere of influence? People say, it's my body, right? And of course, with the body, I can do many things. But this body, you say it's mine. And I can control my fingers, I can control my eyelids, whatever. So the Ishvara, because he is able to control the whole universe, maybe the whole universe is his body. So that is another way to think about it. So there are multiple ways in which we can think about Ishvara.
So to go back to what Srinidhi was saying, then that is what is Leela also. Right? That is Leela, like to be in the game but not attached to
Exactly.
it. That is
Not
Leela.
attached to the friend.
Yes.
That's Vairagya too. Karma Vairagya.
Right.
Vedanta.
So how to practicalize that? Maybe we are confronted with a very tense situation. Maybe I have to write an exam. Anxiety is there. So initially we see that event as a problem, or even more strong word we can use, like danger, whatever. And when we expand our view, we will think of it as an adventure. When we expand even more, we will think of it as a challenge. Oh, this is a way to bring the best out of me. Another thing you can build up is Leela. It's a game. Let me play this game. You see? So we can transform the same event, the perception of that event changes, whether we think of ourselves as a small entity or as a big entity like Ishvara. And we're going to come to this in tomorrow's session when we talk about freedom. All this is linked.
So yesterday you gave us the example of the pirate captain, the captain who landed on the dance. So in that example, then can we say that in there he was trying to look at it as a, maybe he defined it as a challenge, but that there was that Leela aspect in it a little bit. But he was in it, but yet he kind of came out of it.
You didn't think of it as a hopeless situation. Otherwise, you would not even have done anything. If we thought it was hopeless, he would just not do any action. But his mind was so centered, maybe we can't really know what's happening in his mind. Perhaps we could say, oh, this is going to produce the best out of me. Let me use the situation as an excuse to blossom the bud, which is not expressing itself to fullness. Let me use this opportunity to show the fullness of who I am. Many people, many tragedies creates heroes. Like even Rama, they say, there are some people who worship Ravana because without Ravana, who would have known that Rama was a great hero, right? So you need some challenge, and only then the best out of us will be born. So in any challenging situation, any tragedy, there'll always be some heroes that will be born. Not that they're born, it's always there. That seed is now blossoming into fullness. So the definition of Ishvara, Klesha, the Ishvara is beyond Klesha, transcended Klesha. They don't experience pain. Okay. Karma is action. Ishvara does not see himself or herself. Of course, Ishvara itself is in a Pullinga, that word is Pullinga. But at that level, there is no gender, right? So Ishvara is beyond action, which means it's like the sun. The presence of the sun illumines the whole universe. So the presence of Ishvara will make things happen. They are not caught up in action. It doesn't mean that they cannot act. Even if they do action, it will be like a play or a dance. They do it with so much happiness, not because, oh, I need to do it, otherwise tomorrow I'll fail in the exam. It's not like that. Karma can be of two types. One karma is klesha jama karma. There is some pain or misery. It drives the person towards some action. Most people go to work because if they don't work, then they will not prosper in life. Not because they truly enjoy that work. They do it out of obligation. This is an example of klesha jama karma. There is a pain, or if I don't do this karma, I'll be experiencing suffering. That's why I do it. Not because of intrinsic happiness. So this type of action is called klesha jama karma. There is another type of action which is called dhyana jama karma. Dhyana jama karma means the action that is inspired from a meditative state of mind, not from a miserable state of mind, but a meditative state of mind. Patanjali will talk about those kind of actions in the 4th chapter. We'll come to it later. Those are a very different type of action. Inspired action, you can say. Inspired action. Now, the third aspect in this list is called vipaka, fruit of action. So every action has a consequence. The consequence of the action is the fruit of action. So what the sutra is saying is, Ishvara transcends the fruit of action. That means they are not bound by the fruit of action. Even if the action has a consequence, that consequence was already known before. It is not like a surprise consequence. Without knowing, I poked my finger in the socket. I didn't know that it's going to bring so much pain. It's not like that at all. Because Ishvara is all-knowing. We'll come to that sutra next. Ishvara is all-knowing. So for whatever action, the consequence is well known. It is not a surprise consequence. So they transcend vipaka. And then they transcend ashaya. Ashaya means the impressions of the action. Impression. When we act in a certain way and repeatedly we keep acting the same thing again and again, it creates a habit. So habit creating is called ashaya. The same impression, ashaya. And there is something called karma ashaya. Karma ashaya. Karma ashaya means the repository of all the karmas that we did in the past, and it drives them towards the same action. Karma ashaya is the repository of all the unripe. Unripe means they are not fructified. Vipaka means fruit of action. So the karmas that have not been fructified lives in this karma ashaya, the reservoir or repository of all the unripe karmas. And we all carry this big karma ashaya. So when we talk about our existence as 3 levels, I'm sure you have heard of it. The physical body, subtle body, and the causal body. What does the causal body contain? All of us know what is subtle body and physical body. Physical body is what you can touch, the physical body, Annamaya Kosha. The subtle body is all the senses and the sense of action also. The karmendriyas and jnanendriyas. Not the, for example, eye is not the sense organ, it's just a window. But something behind that which sees, that is the sense organ. So that lives in the subtle body. Prana lives in the subtle body. Beyond the subtle body is the causal body. As the name suggests, it is what causes the effect that we see in the physical world. And what is there in the causal body? It is a karmashaya. Karmashaya resides in the causal body, right? And what it says is, Ishvara transcends karmashaya. They are not trapped by karmashaya. They are in control of karmashaya, or some scholars interpret as their karmashaya is not filled with anything. It's an empty tank. They travel lightly. You see, the karmashaya is 0. And I spoke about dhyana jama karmas right before. There is klesha jama karma, which is misery motivated action. The other is dhyana jama karma, which is meditation inspired action.
So that would apply for the karma here.
So this karma is, in this sutra, you have to understand this as klesha jama karma. Dhyana jama karma will not create ashaya, will not create any impression. We are not adding to the repository
But
of
if
karma.
he's transcended klesha, then the karma over here must be dhyana jaya karma.
Transcended means they have full control over it.
They have control over it. Okay.
They are not being controlled by them. Right now, most of us are being controlled by the karma shayas. We can't even choose our body. It is decided by our karma. In fact, it's decided by the karma shayas. But if you are in full control of all of this, such a person is Ishvara.
So there is misery, there is action.
There is misery means Ishvara,
But
if
he's
they
not.
want to, they can choose misery. You see, they have the pause. It's not that Ishvara is somebody who has 0 chance of experiencing misery.
For example, Rama was that. He went to Dvana, he experienced separation from Sita.
He chose that body deliberately in order to experience that.
Yeah. Okay.
So here's one more example, which might be insightful. So in the night, when it's very dark, we want to go from one end of the room to the other end of the room. Okay. If there is no electricity, if there's no light on, what would you do? You take tentative steps little by little, and you will just be feeling around. Hopefully you won't bump into too many objects like that, right? Now, if the light is there, how would you go from one end of the room to the other end of the room? Confident, you know what the path is. You don't deliberately go bumping into objects. When the light is there, you don't bump into them. Like that, Ishvara, because it's all-knowing, will choose the action that is the most appropriate, that will not even bring about a misery. You see?
I think, maybe later on I have a question. I think this is klesha karma, but when it is
Dhyana
karma, there is no
Ashaya.
root, right?
He doesn't
So-
say no upaka, he says no ashaya.
Okay.
Ashaya means the impressions
Impressions.
are not etched in that causal body.
Uh,
In other words, what that sutra says, that sutra comes later in the 4th chapter, Tatra Dhyanajam Anashayam. Dhyanajama karmas have anashaya. There is no ashaya there. What it means, in fact, that's a very profound sutra. Because it came up now, let's understand that sutra. What it says is, any action that you do that is inspired from a peaceful, meditative state of mind will never bind you in the future. It will always free you in the future. It's a very, very profound insight that Patanjali has given. It has to be contemplated upon. Any action that you're inspired to do from within when you're in meditation, do that action. Because it will be a high quality action. It will never have karma bandhas. It will not trap you in the future. For example, if somebody eats junk food, your future experience now is there is a bondage there. Tummy ache will be there. We cannot do what we really like to do. We cannot go and enjoy nature because we'll be sitting at home and we'll be crying because we have a tummy ache. So freedom has been diminished. What Patanjali is saying here is actions that come from a meditative state of mind. For example, the mind is very quiet, very peaceful. You will choose those food items that will benefit the body. If we consume food from an angry state of mind, anger is, you can classify it as klesha. Although Patanjali doesn't include anger as a klesha, you can include it's a miserable state. It's afflicted state or a miserable state. The actions that are born out of miserable state will have unpleasant consequences. It will put more karma in a karma tank, and they will bite us in the future if we activate them. But dhyana jama karmas will always free us. It will not put more into the karma tank. That is the insight. So a karma yogi, what they try to do is to transform all their karma into dhyana jama karmas. So we can examine all our actions. This action, was it klesha jama or dhyana jama? Did I do this action out of expectation of joy or expression of joy? You can use different words. Klesha jama karma means actions that I am doing as an expectation of joy. Dhyana jama karma means I'm already happy. So I'm doing the actions as an expression of joy. So that's the difference between these two. Expression of joy will never bind you in the future. It will always free you in the future. That's the insight. So Ishvara is such a person.
So I have a question actually in the real world or in our workspaces. There are times where despite our best intentions or we have to take action to
His expectation of joy.
no, not expectation of joy, but for example, let's take the current corporate layoffs. As a manager, you may not want to, you may know that this is wrong for that person's family or future, but you have to do it. So, how does one make peace with such, worldly actions that we have to do, for example?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And even there, we can apply one of the statements that we saw before. You are who you are, not who you think you are. You can apply it to even the employee who is going to get laid off. We think that they're going to be miserable without our help. That means we're making them dependent on us, right? But when Ishvara will never see them that way. Ishvara knows the truth of who we are. So the Ishvara will say, okay, I know you are a powerful being who can craft your life the way you want. So maybe that was an opportunity for them to rediscover a bigger version of who they are. I've heard many stories in the 2008 layoff. Many people who got affected, they went on to change their career or do something that they were passionate about, and they became very, very successful. So was that a curse or a blessing? We can't really say that, right? In one perspective, it was a bad event. In another perspective, it was a good event. Later on in the 4th chapter, Patanjali says, good and bad are related. Karma Ashupla Akrishtam Yoginah Trividam Itaresham is the sutra. What he says is, a yogi recognizes that there is no black and white. He talks about the Papa Karma and Punya Karma. You cannot say that. Because what somebody is thinking is virtuous action might be detriment. For example, if somebody is constantly giving charity to the same beggar, they make that beggar dependent on them. They're disempowering them, right? So, although it appears virtuous, we are actually not benefiting them. We are not serving them.
Yeah.
So, a teacher might create some situations in which it might appear as if they're putting them down. Let me share a story. When I was studying with my teacher, Sumitra Sri, so he was trying to teach me Shirasasana. I was very afraid of going upside down, stand on my head, because I might fall. There was a lot of fear in my head. So every day he will ask, do you want to try today? I said, no, tomorrow. Atha was gone. So tomorrow, Shwaha. Right? So for about 6 months, I was able to procrastinate and drag on. And one day he got a little impatient. He said, you better do it today. Like, he raised his voice and anger came. I could actually see some, like a fire coming out of his mouth. I was like, wow, oh my God. And then in 5 seconds, I was in Shirasasana. You see, that was actually serving me. Another person might have thought, oh, why are they being unkind to this poor student, right? But for me, it benefited me. It helped me go to that next level. Otherwise, I would not even have tried. In fact, in India, many teachers use, let me not put himsa or violence, uh, kindness expressing itself as, you know, somebody will slap them. Or, no, BK Iyengar was like that. There are also some YouTube videos. You will see them smack them, and then they will do the asana. So when we look at even laying off a person that way, perhaps it's an opportunity for them to empower. And we will see later, each person's path is because of their own action. We cannot assert anything in others' experience. They are attracting all the events through their karma share. It is impossible to assert something into another person's experience. And in order to state this truth, Patanjali makes a statement in the 3rd chapter, which is very, very interesting. He says, 3rd chapter is full of siddhis, right? So he talks about the siddhi of telepathy. You can listen to what is happening in other people's minds. Pratyayasya parachitta jnanam is the sutra. Parachitta, another person's chitta. The content of another person's mind can be shown to you. Your siddhi can be so high, you can read other people's mind. But then, immediately in the next sutra, Patanjali says, so pratyayasya parachitta jnanam nachatat salambanam tasya vishayi bhutatvat. What he says in the sutra is, although you can see what is there in another person's mind, you cannot plant a thought in their mind. It's just like a surveillance camera. You can observe like a spectator. But what thoughts do they encourage? It is in totally their control. Even the greatest siddha, even the Ishvara, will not be able to implant a thought in your mind. It's profound, right?
But to think about Ishvara itself, you need Ishvara's grace. You would have heard of this.
Yes.
Then what is that? I thought that to even the thought to occur, you need Ishvara's grace.
You need the
What is
grace
that?
from the self. The self is no different from Ishvara.
Yeah.
So that's the right way of looking at it, right? It is not somebody else is giving you the blessing.
Yes.
It is the blessing that is coming from within. There's a sutra like that in the 1st chapter. Let me remember the sutra. Atma Prasadam. What's it? So, Nirvichara Vaisharadye Dhyatma Prasadaha. It's a sutra. Nirvichara Samadhi. When we are in the Nirvichara Samadhi state, Atma Prasada. Atma Prasada means the blessing that comes from the Atman. So you don't need blessing from somebody else. It is not Ishvara's blessing. Or you can say it is Ishvara's blessing because I am no different from Ishvara.
Ishvara. Okay.
That blessing that comes from within,
The thought has to come from within.
yes, that blessing has to come from within. So amazing, right? Our Ishvara guy is like a superhero. But we are all superheroes. That is the moral of the story.
It's an example of avatars.
Hmm.
You can differentiate the shades of that is the Ishvara is the best. But you have your own version of that certain patience or truth. So how do you implement it with this towards?
That is the path of yoga. So that we come out of the little shell. We can think of it as, what do they say? Caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
Yeah.
So we are living a very tiny version of ourselves. And to give full expression, our full expression is the expression of Ishvara, because ultimately there's no difference, it's identical. So living in a tiny bubble to living the fullness of ourselves is why we use this Ishvara Pranidhana. And we're going to take a short break in 2 minutes. As I said yesterday, Ishvara Pranidhana is a practice that is given at the intersection of the 3 abhyasas, namely Kriya Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Samadhi Yoga. If you draw the Venn diagram, the point of intersection is just only one practice, and that one practice is Ishvara Pranidhana. That's why Ishvara Pranidhana appears in multiple places.
Mm.
First time in the first chapter, Ishvara Pranidhana Adva. During Kriya Yoga, he mentions again the second chapter, where he says, Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. Later on in the second chapter, when he talks about Ashtanga Yoga, he says as part of Niyama, and then he gives one more sutra. Samadhi Siddhir Ishvara Pranidhanat. That means with Ishvara Pranidhana, you can directly go to Samadhi. You don't have to use asana, pranayama. If your Ishvara Pranidhana, if your bhakti is so strong, you don't even need to stand on your head. No need to do alternate nostril breathing. No need to do any of these other practices. You have a direct shortcut,
Direct
like a ladder.
to Ishvara.
That's what
That's
this
the
is beautifully illustrated here by Sumitraju. It's her illustrations here. That's the ladder that is showing. Ishvara Pranidhana, it's snakes and ladders, right? You have this game.
shortcut.
From number 2 to number 100, it will take you one big ladder will be there. That ladder is Ishvara Pranidhana.
So, does Patanjali define bhakti?
He doesn't even use the word bhakti. And he just uses the word pranidhana. Vyasa in his commentary, he translates the word pranidhana as bhakti vishesha. Bhakti vishesha means highest form of bhakti, or the special bhakti, you can say. And how this pranidhana differs in the 3 different sadhanas, namely Samadhi Yoga. In Samadhi Yoga, you think of Ishvara as a role model. That is the Abhyasa here. Keep thinking about the Ishvara because that is your true identity. When you pour your awareness on that vessel called Ishvara, our awareness will expand to fill that space. Vitaraga Vishyam Vachitam, we saw that yesterday. In Kriya Yoga, because the focus is on action, so we have to do something for the practice of Ishvara Pranidhana. Vyasa says in his commentary, do some physical action. It could be the action of puja, where you offer flowers, or it could be the action of serving somebody. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, I think 13th or 14th verse. It says, Deva Dvija Guru Pragya Pujanam Shauchamarjavam Brahmacharyam Ahimsacha Shariram Tapa Uchate. Sharira Tapas. Use the body as a vehicle to serve the highest. Bodily tapas, it's called serve people, serve the highest, serve the devatas, serve the gurus, serve the devas and the divine and so forth. So that is what is done in the Kriya Yoga. In Ashtanga Yoga, you do both. You can even use that as a upasana, meditation. And you can use that for puja, pujanam, etc. So the same Ishvara Pranidhana can be used in different ways. So we looked at a couple of sutras about Ishvara. There are more which we will cover after the break. So I think it's a good time to take a break, right? Anujaji? Yeah.
You say that Ishvara is in us, is this big S self.
Yes.
Ishvara is in us. So who is surrendering? Ishvara Pranidhana, that is surrendering. Who is surrendering whom?
Yes, it's the small identity. It is a small identity surrendering to the big. It is like when we have a small idea of ourselves, and when we see a role model who is living the life that you have it in you, we get inspired by them, right? So that is the pranidhana. You're inspired by looking at that. That inspiration is expressed as a bhakti. So that bhakti, special bhakti, it's not like attached bhakti. There's no attachment or dependent bhakti. That's why Vyasa uses the word Vishesha, Bhakti Vishesha.
So I have a question. Did Vyasa write his commentary from a Sankhya philosophy perspective? Because when bhakti is mentioned or in the Vedanta concept, it has a very specific flavor to it.
Yeah.
So when Vyasa says Vishesha Bhakti, from what angle is he?
Yeah, it's the perfect Sankhya. Vyasa's commentary is in very good alignment with Sankhya. That Vyasa who wrote the commentary is not the same Vyasa who wrote Mahabharata.
Okay.
right? Because Vyasa, in fact, today is Vyasa Purnima, right? Guru Purnima is
Oh, yeah.
because it's Vyasa's day, Vyasa's birthday. So sage Vyasa is like a title. It's like a prime minister. So different people don that role. So it's called Vyasa Peetham, the seat of Vyasa. And different people occupied that seat at different times. It's like Ishvara being occupied by different Purushas at different times. So Vyasa Peetham. So it's a different Vyasa.
It's there because sometimes the chronology of things,
Yeah.
we are a little confused as to what it is.
Okay, the time now is 3:40 Central Time. Let's take a 15-minute break. And then the next session, we will start 3:56. It's already 3:41. 3:56, and we'll go on up to maybe 5:15 or so. Okay.
Okay.
Just no, thank you. Sure.